Hello, I'm Gamer Dad from our gamer family. Today I'm going to be by myself. Here is actually a mod of Civilization 4 called Caveman2Cosmos. And as the name implies, it's basically starting you as a caveman. 200,000 BCE, all the way up into the future. I believe it ends somewhere around 5000 AD. But you know, we probably won't get that far. I find the most interesting part of that to be really up until you get into the modern era. At that point, there's a lot of different details that need to be taken control of, and not that that's not fun if you enjoy that style of game, but it starts to become a little unbalanced, particularly if you're winning as the player at that point. So I've already got it loaded up here, the mod loaded up here. It is a large mod, so it does take a while to load up. It does normally have its own entry, but I've never been able to get that working. I'm sure somebody out there from the modder community can actually figure out what that is, but I've never been able to figure out, and it's been not that important for me. So we're going to start a single player game here, and we'll go into the custom game. So I'm going to do is go down the options first, because that's rarely where this whole thing differentiates itself, and then we'll go back up to selecting what kind of civilization we're going to play, as well as maybe go over a couple of things over here. Although the reality is that this hasn't changed hugely from vanilla, or BTS rather, Civ 4. With the exception of some of the map codes have all been optimized for the Caveman2Cosmos. I pretty much stick with this perfect world 2F. I've enjoyed it. I find that it gives you a large variety of some of the non-core map tiles, which keeps the map interesting and allows you to play with some of the features related to the maps, and particularly some of the things around damage caused by your environment, which is something that's in this particular build. So let's go down the options here. You've got things like Advanced Start, which are normal civilization thing, no city raising, city flipping after contest, no barbarians. Personally, I like raging barbarians. I find that it's just more fun to have barbarians spawning in there. It provides more of a challenge. I know that some people seem to think that it also hinders the AI on a little bit. I haven't found that in this particular mod, that a raging barbarian hinders the AI too terribly much, but you know, we all have different. I also disable technology trading and technology broking. There are a lot of ways that you can, if not cheat the AI, gain a great deal of value from the AI by selling them technologies. It does allow, in some cases, does allow the AI to keep up with you technologically if you're far ahead, but there are some other tweaks in this game that help to alleviate that without allowing the technology trading. So I typically disable these. We're not going to go into these. Require the complete kills before you annihilate a civilization. I've never really, we'll have the vassal states here. You can disable random events. I find that they don't really have too much impact on the play because there's so much other things going on. You know, losing a particular tile has less and less impact. So having them in there is just one there. Now there is a mod, the Revolutions mod, which is part of that. I've never been a big fan of it. My play style is typically as a builder. That's the way I enjoy playing Civilization. As a result, I don't play at the highest difficulty levels. You know, I know a lot of people out there, and I'm sure there are videos out there of people playing at the deity level and higher, or you know, deity I think is the highest one. They over the years they've tweaked that around or whatnot, but you know, since I've always been playing civilization games since Civ 1, or I've always what I enjoy about the Civ game is building cities and optimizing gameplay and through point. Not that I don't like going to war occasionally. Not that I don't worry about this AIs coming after me, because they do, typically because I don't build as large an army as I probably should. That means that I'm perceived as the low-hanging fruit, and therefore end up perhaps as many wars as the most warmongers. But when I build something, I like to hold on to it. It's just the way that I particularly play. However, for those who like a little more uncertainty and another layer of complexity thrown on top of their game, enabling the Revolutions mod can really help out. Religions, I typically don't research the religions I don't want. I grab a couple in order to get some of the perks from some of them, but I'm not a big fan. No Inquisitions, no Barbarian, no Tech Diffusion. You can turn off Tech Diffusion. I leave it on because it helps keep the AI closer in parity to you, technology-wise, particularly if you're in the lead. You can make yourselves really complicated and really hard for yourself by starting as a minor civ and having to fight up to become a normal civ. But again, typically because I start on huge maps with lots of civs, I don't end up being so close to a civ that I can't get past the minor civ state before I encounter other civs, and therefore this doesn't have as much impact on me. However, on smaller maps this might have a larger impact. Usable mountains. I love this part. If I played no other portion of this game, usable mountains would be one feature that I would enable automatically. The ability to use mountains and to use the resources on mountains and to have mountain spawn resources. Just gives you that much more playable space and allows you to spread out a little bit more without having to feel like I just wasted 60% of the usable space on this particular city. It will never be a major city. Now they can become very powerful cities by using the resources of the mountains. Surround and Destroy is a combat mod. That means that you get bonuses if you can spread out your armies and surround another person's army. The bonuses are not large, but they can swing the battle a little bit in your favor. It also helps to minimize the old stacks of doom that were prevalent in Civilization 4. There's a couple of other mods in here that, or settings in here that I'm going to enable, or I have enabled, that will also help with the stacks of doom. Advanced Diplomacy gives you more options as you're performing diplomacy with the AI. Unlimited Wonders, because this mod adds huge numbers of wonders. I always turn this on simply because otherwise it's not fun. Again, I'm a builder. I like to build as much as I can. I like to build the wonders, not so much because they're unbalanced, although there are a couple in here that one can argue kind of are, oh, gotta have this mod, or rather, gotta have this wonder. But for the most part, they're fairly well balanced, and only do things like maybe mean you don't have to build a particular building in every single city, because this wonder provides that automatically. Barbarian Generals is kind of a cool feature. That means that even as an AI civilization, or rather as a civilization, you're allowed to get generals. It means the barbarians, as they start slaughtering things, also generate general points and have their own generals, which can make things very interesting. Great Commanders. I love this feature. It allows you to have field commanders that give your troops some bonuses, and we'll go into those once we get a couple of those in the game if it do. Some of these here, Advanced Economy, gives you so much there you have to deal with. There's so much other stuff to deal with that this just, I think, slows down the game with no real advantage, but for those who like it, that's a good one. I'm not going to go through all of these. So if you turn on the United Nations, Advanced Espionage allows you to have more powerful attacks from your spies, as well as giving you some different types of missions that your spies can run that aren't in the core game. Infinite XP is a nice thing in that it doesn't reset the experience on your troops once they go up a level. Unlike in vanilla, where once you go up a level, you start back from 0. The reason I do this is because there are so many different promotions for all the units that the only way you can really get some really cool promotions is to just allow your units to do it. Granted, if you're going to war a lot and you're not on the winning side, this is a moot point, but you can get some pretty cool features out there, and so I like it. I think it adds a dimension. It kind of makes it fun, and this is not limited to you as the player. The AI can do it as well, and the AI does take advantage of this. Here's where we really start to get into some of the really interesting things. So developing leaders. So unlike the vanilla game where your leader has certain traits they start with, and you can see up here, if you look at here, fanatic, populist, different types of, I forget what all of these stands for, reverent, I think, or isolationist. These are different features, and they gave different skills and powers to your leaders. This disables it, so this has no meaning now. So that's why I wanted to go over this before I selected who I was going to play, because the reality is that once you turn this on, who you select up there doesn't matter. You just decide, hey, I feel like being, and I always like to play the Native Americans, just from my own personal background with some Native American history in my family. It's always been something that I always enjoy doing it. And since this really doesn't make any difference anymore, all other than the color of the boundaries and the borders, which I'll get into a little bit here before I hit start or launch on this game. So I'm going to pick the Hiawatha, which gives me the Iroquois. There is an option here that you can basically disable, or rather, you can be any leader with any nation or any civilization. So, again, because the leader traits don't make any bit of difference, I tended there, and plus the game also wipes out all the traits related to the race or to the civilization as well. We'll be creating cultures. Since we'll be creating cultures as we go out, a lot of the traits that would be associated with your civilization are now associated with cultures. And depending on where you have cities and the types of resources around you, different types of cultures are available to you. So you're not going to get to. I once played a game where I was playing Japan, one of the leaders of Japan, and I never actually got the culture of Japan. In fact, one of the AIs ended up researching Japan, the Japanese culture, because I didn't have the requisite resources in any of my cities. I ended up being landlocked almost entirely throughout the game. I think I had one coastal city, and that was one of the requirements. It had to be a coastal city that had fish, and I believe there was one other thing that they also had to have in that resource, in that area of the city, in order to research the city, or rather in order to build that particular culture. So I think that's a really interesting point. One of the other things that's interesting about the game is you build cultures, and they may show up at different areas at different times depending on who you have, and then you get different leaders based on the cultures that you have access to, which is very cool. Again, you don't, by disabling this, your leader starts as a blank slate. You have no positive traits going for you, and everything you do throughout the game reinforces the leader and makes him or her stronger as well. And there's also negative traits that you can get to. We'll get into this one once we get into an actual gameplay, but the C2C combat mod here, Size Matters, is a wonderful addition. And one of those, like I said, there are some features that combat the stacks of doom. This is one of those features that helps combat that stack of doom. Because what it allows you to do is you build a normal unit, and once you get a number of those together, you can combine them into a larger unit. So as it says here, units are modified by their size, volumes, and combat quality. So a special unit, a single person, may be of exceptional quality, but the size is 1, and the volume is also 1 because it's a single person. But they have exceptional combat quality and can defeat whole units because of that. Sort of, your classic martial arts movie where the hero slays entire armies in storming the castle, or is assaulted by an entire regiment of well-trained troops, only to have all those well-trained troops slaughtered in mass by the hero. That's what kind of this gives you the option, but it also applies to the animals that you're going to be encountering and the barbarian tribes and the AI. In fact, I think this particular size matters mod makes the AI more difficult because the AI will really build up troops. I've had situations where I've been 1 or 2 technology levels more advanced than the AI that I happen to be fighting, only to have him basically steamroll me, or at least maybe not steamroll is not the right word, but do more than their fair share of damage because they had a couple of units that the AI had really advanced up so that it had 3 or 4 times the normal power of the unit that it was legitimately or it normally represented, and because the advancement is so incremental in troops, even normally in vanilla, a two-tier difference might be worth enough that it doesn't matter. You could annihilate any number of troops below you as long as you were moderately careful. But because it's so much more incremental, that only gives you a couple of points advantage by having 2 tiers difference. That a 3 or 4 fold increase in volume or size of those troops gives them a parity with your troops that it makes it more difficult for you to overcome, and the AI is pretty good about exploiting that, or at least in my experience is pretty good at exploiting that. I've lost combats because I didn't check close enough before attacking a troop, only to find it kills a whole bunch of my troops, and I realized the reason why was because they had a super unit in the middle there that was 3 or 4 times the strength of every unit around it, and all I was doing is just making it stronger by giving it more experience. Assigned specialists, so specialists give experience to units that are built that match the same type as the specialist. Since there are a lot of different types of specialized units, this is kind of a cool feature. It allows them to get some of the special abilities that make them a little more useful. And so realistic siege makes it a little more difficult to conquer cities because now you have to bombard the defenses down before you can actually do it, and just being adjacent to a city does damage to your units, which means you have to be conscious about cycling them out and makes it more difficult. I find that to be a fun one. So that, again, that gives the AI a little more breathing room and allows them to be a little more competitive. Even as you start to pull ahead, which we're going to. So I've gone a little bit higher than on this. I can play at a monarch level, but I don't enjoy that level of game so much. So I'm going to play at noble for this particular game, partly because I'm not going to be concentrating as heavily on strategy, because I'm going to be trying to explain some of what I'm doing and what you're seeing on the screen as we go along, and be spending a little bit less time thinking about how's the best way to manage my citizens and my cities. I'll leave everything else random here, and other than that, we're going to leave it alone. We'll go a mastery here, just because I've basically you get points for every time you complete one of these victory types. And again, since I've never actually completed one of these games, I tend to, right around the modern era, I wouldn't say lose interest, but it starts to get bogged down and the turns become incredibly slow, as you can get 2 or 3 turns maybe in an hour, because there's so much going on and there's so much you have to manage that even automating a lot of stuff still requires a great deal of your time. And that's probably where this mod suffers a little bit, you know, if I had to get a criticism for it. But if you read the development boards, the developers, the mod developers know that as well. They know that it tends to bog down, and they are doing some development on it, and I'm always watching that. And they seem to come out with a new version, a new complete build, about once a year seems to be the average for them. So, you know, I support them. I hope you will support them as well. Maybe try this mod yourself if you're a big Civ 4 fan. So we're going to hit launch, and then we're going to end this particular video here. In part 1, we'll come back with the starting set here with the Iroquois, and we'll get into actually starting a game and see what it is. So thank you very much for listening. Please click the like or subscribe button if you'd like that, and you know, please stay tuned for the next video where we actually get into some of that gameplay. So thank you so much, and have a wonderful day.